A mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or dsw.com today, and let us surprise you.
Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised.
My name is Sarah Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. Today, I'm discussing the case of the Beaumont Children. This case has had the public and investigators reeling for decades over one question. How do 3 young kids and all of their belongings completely vanish from a beach in broad daylight in front of thousands of people? This is the case of the Beaumont Children. In the 1960s, Australia was regarded as a pretty safe place to raise your kids. Adelaide, a metropolitan city of over 500,000 residents in 1966, really was the idyllic place to raise kids, especially the suburbs, and specifically Somerton Park, which is where Nancy and Jim Beaumont were raising their 3 kids. Nancy and Jim got married in 1955, and a year later, in 1956, they welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Jane. 2 years later, in 1958, they had another little girl named Arna. And in 1962, they would have their youngest, a boy named Grant. Jim worked as a traveling salesman while Nancy stayed home with the kids and ran the house. By all accounts, they were happy. Now, fast forward to January 1966. Jane is 9, Arna is 7, and Grant is 4. It's a summer month for Australia, which means the kids are out of school and it's beach season. The Beaumonts spend a lot of time at their local Glenelg Beach, which is just a few minutes from their house. On January 25th, Jim drops all 3 kids off at the beach before heading out of town for work. But before leaving the area, he kind of hangs back, sits, and watches the kids. He really wants to see how they act while he and Nancy aren't around. As expected, Jane watches her younger siblings, and the 3 stick together while they play. It's exactly what Jim was hoping for. So he leaves for his trip while the kids play alone at the beach. Jane, Arna, and Grant follow their instructions and take the 2 p.m. bus home, and Nancy is right there at the bus stop to greet them. Now, while kids riding the bus alone might feel a little jarring, this was a typical summer activity in Australia for many kids. A lot of kids would board the bus in the morning to go to the beach, play with some friends for a few hours, take the afternoon bus home, maybe eat some lunch, and then either go back to the beach or play in the community until dinner or until the streetlights came on. I know it sounds cliche, but many Australians who grew up in this time will tell you that they slept at night with their doors unlocked, and that kids really could come and go without much worry. But the next morning was January 26th, Australia Day, which is kind of like the 4th of July here in the US. It's a major holiday, and a hot one. So, of course, the kids want to go back to the beach. But since Jim is out of town with the car, they have to take the bus both ways. So the kids put on their swimsuits and they pack their towels into a small blue-green bag that was given to Jane to carry. Nancy also gave them bus fare, and even though the plan was only for them to be at the beach for 2 hours, she still gave them a little extra for lunch. In total, it was 8 shillings and a sixpence. After they were all suited up and their bags were packed, they were ready to go. Nancy watches her children walk from their home and board the bus for the beach. And before she knew it, the 2 hours were up. It was noon, and it was time to meet them back at the bus stop. But when the bus came, her kids were not on it. Now, Nancy doesn't immediately panic. She assumes that it's most likely that they either decided to walk home or just to stay at the beach for a little bit longer. She figures that they'll catch the same bus they caught yesterday at 2 p.m. Even though Jane was only 9, she was known to be a very responsible child with a good head on her shoulders. Jim would later tell reporters that he felt like Jane had the mind of a 15-year-old, and he knew that she could take care of her siblings. He also said that Jane knew not to speak with strangers and not to go too deep into the water. These children were familiar with the area, responsible, had taken this exact bus route before, and it was a national holiday in an area that was considered to be extremely safe. I can understand why Nancy wasn't immediately worried. So another 2 hours pass, and Nancy heads back out to the bus stop to meet her kids, sure that they tell her all about the beach with a good reason for having missed the 12 p.m. bus. But her kids aren't on this bus either. This is when she realizes that something could be seriously wrong. Now, Nancy decides that since there are so many possible routes to the beach, she doesn't want to risk missing them or having them come home to an empty house and being scared. So she decides that it's best to go home and wait for them to get back or call, at least until Jim gets home. She kind of nervously searches the streets along her way back home. And when she gets home, the kids aren't there either. Jim gets home from work not long after, around 3 p.m., and at this point, Nancy is in a full-blown panic. She explains what's going on, and while she stays home, Jim drives to the beach to look for the kids. But there are massive crowds at the beach, and he can't find them anywhere. This is when he realizes that they might really be missing. So he turns around, gets Nancy, and they start looking together. They ask their neighbors, they go to the kids' friends' parents' houses, but no one has seen them and they can't find them anywhere. There are conflicting sources about the time, but sometime between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., they report the kids missing. And the constable taking the report assures them that the kids are probably fine. It's a safe area. And 3 kids being abducted in broad daylight in front of thousands of beachgoers felt unlikely. So instead of searching the beach immediately, officers instead go to the Beaumont home, thinking that the kids could just be hiding. They do a thorough search of the home, and the kids aren't there. So after ensuring that the Beaumonts weren't just somehow not seeing 3 hidden children in their home, they finally begin to search. They organize 30 volunteer officers and begin searching the beach and surrounding areas. They also begin contacting local news stations. And I think that this really shows just how uncommon and scary this type of incident was for this area. They don't just mention the kids on the 9 o'clock news. They interrupt local programming with this information. They give a very brief description of Jane, Grant, and Arna, pointing out that they all have brown eyes. And of course, they ask the public to please keep an eye out for them and to call investigators with any information that could aid in their search. Investigators also put surveillance on the airport, as well as local major roadways. But as they quickly lost daylight, the search was called off until the morning. But as the evening wore on and there were no answers about the kids, Nancy got so distraught that a doctor was called in to sedate her. And this sedation was so heavy that it would take a few days for it to wear off. That night, Jim drove the streets looking for his kids for hours. He was set on not going home and going to sleep without finding them. As Jim searched and searched and searched, there was a countrywide alert sent out for the kids. But Jim does eventually go home that night without his children. The next day, as witnesses began being interviewed by police, investigators quickly realized that there was one common thread between many of these witnesses. They reported that the kids weren't seen alone on the beach that day. This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Chewy. If you have pets, you probably know about Chewy, and you also know that when they say that they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, they're not messing around. To keep them happy, Chewy has over 100,000 products from all the brands my pets love at prices I love. To keep them healthy, Chewy offers pet prescriptions, pet insurance, telehealth vet visits, and they're even rolling out vet clinics across the country. I've been shopping with them for a very long time. And in addition to the auto-ship feature that gets the dog's food to them every single month, I also love to experiment with different treats. But I'm a bit picky. For me, it has to be high quality with simple ingredients. I recently picked up treats from Shepherd Boy Farms that are 100% just chicken breast. Popcorn and Heber are already obsessed. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. That's chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
The search for the Beaumont children was in full swing on January 27, 1966. The Sea Rescue Squadron brought in 5 boats to search the shoreline, and a slew of officers and volunteers continued searching the nearby area. But as these searches continued, investigators quickly narrowed in on some very concerning witness statements. At least 7 witnesses helped them build the following timeline. Just after 10 a.m., the kids got off the bus, ran to the beach, and played for about an hour. About an hour after that, around 11 a.m., they walked to a small grassy area with sprinklers called Collie Reserve. This is where they were approached by an unknown male. He's been described as white but suntanned, possibly in his 30s, around 6'1", athletic, with wavy blonde to light brown hair and a thin face. He was also wearing a dark blue Speedo-style swimsuit with a white stripe. According to the witness statements, he apparently sees the kids, chats with them for a little bit, and then lays down on a towel while he watches them. It really seems like he was trying to posture himself to kind of look like their dad, a family member, or some type of caregiver. Many witnesses said it looked like he knew the kids. According to news reports, an older couple was sitting on the beach that morning, and they believe that they saw the Beaumont children playing with this man who at the time they thought was their father. They told investigators that after playing with the kids, he even helped the children get dressed. This is despite especially 9-year-old Jane obviously being able to dress herself. They also said that this man asked them if they saw anyone around the children's belongings, because it appeared that someone had taken their money. And it's important to note that he used the word our, as if the money belonged to all of them. Again, it seems like he's just positioning himself to look like he should be there with the kids, that he's taking care of them. But of course, investigators believe that this was just a tactic used by the man, not only to quell concerns about a stranger being around 3 young kids, but to also gain trust with the kids and lure them away. If their money really was gone, or if he took it, they obviously wouldn't have money to take the bus home or buy lunch, and he could easily swoop in and, quote, save the day. This man was last seen putting on a dry change of clothes while the kids waited for him on a nearby bench. But there were 2 more sightings of the children. One of these sightings was by the Beaumont's mailman. He said he last saw the kids about 100 meters or about 300 feet from the beach around lunchtime. He said he was just riding his bike down nearby Mosley Street when he saw Grant, Jane, and Arna at an intersection. Not thinking that anything was out of the ordinary, he stopped his bike and said hello. Then he turned and headed up Jetty Road towards the post office. And across the road from that intersection was a popular bakery called Wenzel's Pie Shop. And this is where the last verified sighting of the Beaumont children happened. The woman working behind the counter said that she was familiar with the kids, and she remembers Jane coming in. She ordered cakes and requested, quote, a pie for the man, end quote. Then she paid with a crisp 1-pound note. Remember, Jane's mom only gave her 8 shillings and a sixpence that morning. This large amount of money that Jane had just stood out to the woman. So at this point, investigators have many eyewitnesses saying that the kids were last seen with a man who seemed to be very familiar with them, and at least 2 witnesses who saw them alone outside of the beach area. All signs were pointing to them being abducted by this man. But of course, they were also considering the alternatives. Maybe the kids were hiding for some reason, or were in some type of accident like a drowning or a collapsing dune. But those theories did seem much less likely. I mean, the odds of one child slipping under the water and drowning unnoticed or being in a tragic accident does feel plausible. But for that to happen to 3 kids without anyone seeing anything seems extremely unlikely. Either way, no matter the theory, they needed to act fast. The search for the kids was widely televised throughout Australia, and within 6 days, investigators had followed up on nearly 1,000 leads. People in the community and the surrounding areas were flocking to the Adelaide police station to give witness reports, tips, and leads. And while we know that a lot of tips can be a blessing, they can also be extremely difficult to manage and sort through. The officers were overwhelmed. Throughout Adelaide and the surrounding areas, stormwater drains and sewers were opened, flushed, and searched to no avail. Even though it seems like they got off to a rocky start, investigators seem to have left no place unsearched. They even drained the local boat harbor, sending dozens of cadets and volunteers to trudge through the waist-deep mud, searching for any evidence of the Beaumont children. And that's the thing. It wasn't just that the children had vanished. Every trace of them from that day was just gone. No pieces of clothing were recovered. Not the beach towels, not the blue and green bag they took the towels in, not Jane's white purse. They didn't find anything to help lead investigators in any direction. So wherever the kids were, the items were either with them or had been disposed of. The town and really entire country was buzzing over this case. And 3 days after the kids were reported missing, on January 29th, the local Sunday Mail ran the story with a headline that read, in all caps, quote, "Sex crime now feared," end quote. And at the same time, dozens of calls came pouring into radio stations and newspaper offices, trying to confirm rumors that the kids had been found. The rumors were so persistent that the police had to make a public statement. They said that they'd reached a stalemate in the search for the Beaumont children. And of course, as we see happens in some of these cases, everything kind of begins happening all at once. That same day, investigators had divers searching the Padawalonga Bridge area. This was based off a tip from a woman who said that on January 26th, she saw 2 girls and a young boy at the water's edge below the southern side of the bridge. She told investigators that she had stopped to ask them if they knew how to get to Mary Street in Glenelg, the same suburb the beach the kids went missing from is located in. But they told her that they didn't live in the area, and basically that they couldn't help her. Divers searched the water and there was no trace of the kids anywhere. And from what I could find, this isn't considered an official sighting, but it is one more body of water that can be marked off their list of places to search. Of course, amidst all the headlines and rumors, Jim and Nancy are just beside themselves. On January 31st, Jim went on TV and made a very emotional plea for his kids to be returned. Reporters noted that he was visibly battling his emotions before he could speak. But he did eventually say, quote, "Today is a world of prayer throughout Australia for Australia Day. I hope whoever is holding my children will return them," end quote. Jim then began sobbing for several minutes. When he did catch his breath, he said, quote, "My wife is still under sedation," end quote. But this appears to be Jim's breaking point, because after that, he couldn't speak another word. It's just heartbreaking. The South Australian Police Commissioner, Mr. J.G. McKenna, would then take Jim's place, saying that he was just as baffled by this case as anyone else. Not long after Jim's emotional appeal, an unknown caller would contact the Age newspaper offices claiming that they had Jane, Arna, and Grant. The switchboard operator said that he had a foreign accent, and he told the operator, quote, "I want reward money for them. It will have to be a good reward," end quote. The switchboard operator then tried to switch the caller to the Chief of Staff's extension, but they hung up before it got connected. Investigators at the time said that they weren't going to simply dismiss the call as a hoax. They were taking it as a serious lead that they wanted to follow up on. But in the end, it doesn't seem that anything came of it. This episode of Voices for Justice is brought to you by Quince. I've been trying to be more intentional about what I wear each day. I'm leaning into pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and still put together, and Quince has been my go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are flattering, and everything just works without overthinking it. They use premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and ultra-soft denim. And the best part? Everything is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality and craftsmanship, not brand markup. I recently just ordered their tiered linen dress, of course in black. I wanted to pair it with one of my favorite pairs of brown wedges. The problem was, I didn't have a brown purse, so I got that from Quince too. It's one of my favorite outfits. It's easy, effortless, and feels amazing, especially as we're getting a little bit warmer here in Phoenix. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/justice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/justice for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/justice.
What they did to your family, you're lucky to make it out alive.
Streaming on Peacock.
These men are going to come after me. Taking them out is my only chance.
Put a bullet in her head.
From the co-creator of Ozark.
Looks like a family was running drugs.
Execution-style killing, it's rare for the Keys. And it leads on who they might have been running for.
The cartel killed my family. I'm gonna kill them. All of them.
MIA. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
In-depth searches for the Beaumont children went on for months. If a new tip or lead came in that sent investigators back to an area they already searched, they were happy to search again. But really, no matter how hard investigators worked to solve this case, their efforts never restored the comfort and safety taken from the community. 3 kids vanishing in front of thousands of people without a trace terrified parents all across the country. They wanted and needed answers to feel safe again. But investigators couldn't deliver. By February, the government decided to offer a reward. They put up £250. If that amount feels a little low, you aren't alone. This not only upset and frustrated the Beaumont family, but also the public. Jim and Nancy added their own funds along with other local donations throughout the country and brought the reward up to £10,000. But even with this large reward, 9 months into the investigation, tips began to run dry, and investigators just didn't know where to look next. It's around this time that desperate locals, along with media outlets, pushed the police to work with a well-known Dutch clairvoyant. His name is Gerard Quave, and he's worked with international investigations to help find missing people. Local businessman and friend to the Beaumont family, Barry Blackwell, told Crime Investigation Australia in 2007 that he'd helped facilitate filming the beach shoreline that the kids vanished from to send to Gerard in hopes that he could analyze it and maybe find out where they went. Gerard replied and sent back drawings depicting what he believed were the details of the Beaumont children's last walk. He didn't believe that the children had been kidnapped, but instead buried alive. He said that in his visions he saw Arna, Jane, and Grant crawling through a barrier, past a warning sign, through a small hole, and then suddenly what appears to be either sand or water begins falling in on the kids. And the media and locals follow this entire journey. Really, at this point, it's all they have. So they take this information and run with it. They begin organizing with locals to go back to the barrier wall with the warning sign and search a massive drain that led to the sea. But that drain was blocked. This made people think maybe that's what he meant by the kids being buried alive. So they partner with the fire department and borrow a hose, and they get to the root of this blockage. And the kids weren't there. But this clairvoyant isn't giving up. He flies out to Adelaide on November 8th, and when he lands, he's met by a huge media presence. They're literally yelling questions at him as he descends the stairs of the plane. And what they wanted to know was one point of contention: pay. Was he taking advantage of this family? And while it appears that the plane ticket was paid for by family friend Barry, the first thing he wants the public to know and address is that he's not going to charge anyone for his services. The next day, Jim and Nancy are interviewed by the local media, and they want to know how they feel about this clairvoyant helping. Jim tells the reporter, quote, "What can you say in this moment? We've been hanging on for 9 months and 14 days now. And well, we just gotta wait and hope and pray." End quote. The reporter then asks Jim if he hopes that Gerard succeeds. And Jim replies that he really appreciates him coming to help find the kids, but he doesn't believe his vision. He and Nancy have to have hope that their kids will be found alive. But Gerard is here, and he starts his first day in Adelaide touring the beach where the kids were last seen. He then meets with investigators at a warehouse in Paringa Park. This is a suburb of Adelaide that the children were known to play at that had recently been renovated. And Gerard insists that the kids are buried under the new concrete floor. And he tells the same thing to the media. So the state requests to dig up this warehouse floor. But that request was denied. The owners say that the ground was thoroughly inspected before the concrete was poured. There really wasn't any good reason to dig it up. From here, Gerard basically says, well, I've done my job, I figured it out, and I'm going back home. But just a few months later, on January 21st, 1967, almost a year to the day that the kids went missing, a patron of the recently formed Citizens Action Committee told the Age newspaper that he'd reached an agreement with one of the owners of the warehouse. They will allow the floor to be excavated, but not at the company's expense. If they wanted to destroy the warehouse, they'd have to pay for it. And at this point, I'm sure you'd expect nothing less. The community came together and quickly raised that money. And on January 26th at 11:30 a.m., on the 1-year anniversary of the kids going missing, a public meeting was held at the warehouse to announce the date that they would begin digging. That excavation began in March and took 10 days. But the kids were not found. The chairman of the Citizens Action Committee said that while they did not find the kids during the dig, it had been useful as it removed, quote, "once and for all a nagging doubt concerning the children," end quote. Investigators have said on record that after this, it really just became a circus around the family. They were bombarded with prank callers, letters, rumors, and constant media. It seemed never-ending. And one of the cruelest hoaxes, 2 letters were sent to Jim and Nancy in 1968, alleging that they were written by their daughter Jane and an unknown man who was looking after them in Victoria. Jim spent half a day driving out to a post office to have his kids returned to him, and spent 3 days waiting just to find out it was all a hoax.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The months turned into years, and Jim and Nancy left the children's rooms frozen in time, just waiting for the day that they came home. Despite there being a lot of media coverage in this case, there unfortunately isn't a lot of information about Arna and Grant, the two youngest. But there are more details about what 9-year-old Jane was like. All of Jane's family and friends talk about how mature she was and how she took such good care of her siblings. Some reports say that Jane wanted to be a writer when she grew up, and others say a nurse. No matter what she chose to do, those who knew her all agreed on one thing. Jane was going to do good in the world. I think the best way to learn about Jane is to read her own writing. In addition to keeping all the kids' rooms completely untouched, her parents also kept a letter she wrote them on what appears to be a night she was babysitting her siblings. That letter reads, quote, "Dear Mom and Dad, I am just about to go to bed and the time is 9. I put Grant's nappy on so there is no need to worry about him wetting on the sheet. Grant wanted to sleep in his own bed, so one of you will have to sleep with Arna. Although you will not find the room in very good condition, I hope you find them as comfortable as we do. Good night to you both, Jane. P.S. I hope you had a very nice time wherever you went. P.P.S. I hope you don't mind me taking your radio into my room, Daddy." End quote. I think this letter highlights just how responsible Jane was, and how responsible she felt for her little siblings. Her schoolmate Jenny said that Jane was a smart, reliable young girl, and that Jane would often have 4-year-old Grant on her hip while she was out playing, especially when they were at the beach. She said that Jane would do anything for her siblings, and was very protective of them. I have to imagine that no matter what happened to the kids, Jane fought for them. But despite this being the largest search of land and sea in Australian history, years would pass without any clues as to what happened to the Beaumont children. But of course, as these years went by, investigators received countless calls from all across Australia and really the world. People said that their neighbors, friends, or families had the Beaumont children. There were even a few incidents where people claimed that they were one of the kids. Investigators followed every single one of these leads, but none of them brought them closer to finding them. Really, there wouldn't be any real or tangible leads for about 20 years, until March 1986. This is when 3 suitcases full of newspaper clippings featuring the Beaumont children with cryptic writings were found at a trash dump. In an article found in one of the suitcases on a picture of Jane, the words, quote, "She used to comb my hair," end quote, were written in red ink. On another article featuring the 1966 search of the Sandhills were the words, quote, "Not in the Sandhills, in sewage drain," end quote. And on an article featuring the composite sketch of the man was written, quote, "Lies all bluff," end quote. Obviously, this was something investigators wanted to follow up on. However, this lead was dropped within 24 hours of its discovery, after detectives received a call from relatives of an elderly woman explaining that she was obsessed with the case. She spent years collecting and keeping all these newspaper articles, and after her death, they decided to dump the suitcases. It was another dead end. But of course, the outstanding question to this day is who was the man with them at the beach? Like I briefly mentioned, a sketch was created in 1966 based on the witness sightings. And this hand-drawn sketch is so well done that it looks like a portrait of a man. And while it didn't seem to generate leads in the early years of the investigation, it does help later on. Now, there have been a few notable suspects and persons of interest in this case. But as of 2013, investigators seem to be putting a lot of investigative effort into one suspect in particular, Harry Phillips. Now, this man was not on the investigators' radar at the beginning of this investigation. It really wasn't until Channel 7 News began conducting its own investigation and felt confident in naming local businessman Harry Phillips as a potential suspect. Bill Hayes, a former detective for the South Australian Police Force, believes Harry is a likely suspect based on the information that Harry's son, Hayden, provided. In 1966, Harry Phillips lived right down the street from the beach that the kids went missing from. and just a short walk from that bakery they were last seen at. If you were standing on the lawns of the Collie Reserve, that grassy area with the sprinklers I told you about earlier, and you face towards the town, you can see the street that the cake shop is on. And if you look further down, you can see a church at the very end of that street. And right before the church is where Harry lived. Harry Phillips is a well-known local business owner. He owned a factory that made metal castings for the car industry, and he was well connected politically. He was also known to be charismatic and charming. But his son Hayden said that's not who Harry was at home. He claims that his father was very violent and physically and sexually abusive. Hayden sat down with Detective Bill Hayes willingly to be recorded in 2013. He went over his childhood and why he believes that his father was involved in the abduction of the Beaumont children. Hayden was 15 in 1966. But he remembers that day because it was remarkably hot. He tells Bill that he remembers seeing his father in the backyard with the 3 Beaumont children. He says that he saw his father direct the children into their house, and that they never came out. Hayden said that he was headed to work when he witnessed this, and that he did hear gunshots at the home, but that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. He says his father carried a pistol, and gunshots were a completely normal occurrence at their home. But Hayden says that when he gets back from work, he sees more. He sees his dad loading surfboard covers into his car. But he says that at the time, this doesn't really alarm him. He was used to seeing these surfboard covers because that's how Harry transported dresses. Hayden waited years to come forward until after his father's death, saying that he only did that because he was encouraged by his wife. He said it took him years to connect the dots and realize that those kids were the Beaumont children. Then it took him more time to find the courage to come forward. He knew his father was a powerful, rich, and well-respected man, and how his story could be perceived. In 2014, just a year after Hayden gave this interview to Bill, he passed away, and his widow would pass just before the airing of the Channel 7 report. When this investigation was finally aired on Channel 7, naming Harry as a suspect, it prompted 2 brothers to come forward, saying that they may have unknowingly dug the Beaumont children's grave. These brothers were 15 and 17 at the time, and they were spending their summer looking for odd jobs because they were saving to buy a car. They say that they were approached by a well-dressed businessman on the Australia Day holiday weekend to dig a large hole at the factory that Harry Phillips owned. And at the time, they didn't think much of it. But they say that it took them 2 days to dig this hole, and once they were done, the well-dressed gentleman gave them each a £1 note. They say that after this, they just went on with their lives. They didn't think much of it until they saw this report. This report also brought forward a woman who claims that Harry sexually assaulted her when she was 14. She said that it took place right outside of Harry's factory. And after seeing the report, she realized that it was Harry Phillips. Of course, based on all this information, investigators want to dig deeper. They interview the now grown men who say that they dug the hole. And armed with this new information, officers go to Harry's factory in November 2013. They use ground-penetrating radar to look for any anomalies that might indicate movement or objects in the soil. But they did go back in February 2018 to dig in a new spot based on geophysical testing of the grounds. They found an anomaly in the soil. They dig, but they find animal bones and trash. Nothing concerning the Beaumont children. A few weeks after that dig, Harry's younger son, Wayne Phillips, came forward to tell the Australian Sunday Mail that his brother Hayden was mentally ill and that their dad had nothing to do with the disappearance of the Beaumont children. Despite them finding themselves at another stalemate with this factory site, authorities say that they still have some investigations to complete about the wider allegations against Harry. But as of 2018, Superintendent Bray said that there will be no further comments on those inquiries at this time. And that's pretty much where the case is today. Nancy and Jim lived well into their 90s. Jim passed away in April 2023 at the age of 97. Nancy had passed away in a nursing home 4 years prior at the age of 92. They were separated at the times of their deaths, but both of them clung on to hope that their children would be found alive somewhere in the world. As of recording this episode, it has now been 59 years since Jane, Arna, and Grant disappeared. And there is yet to be an arrest or charge in connection with their case. It is still actively being investigated. In 2022, the reward for information in the Beaumont's case was set at $1 million Australian dollars. Which brings me right to our call to action. Please keep the Beaumont Children's pictures and case in the public eye. In 2017, 9 News in Adelaide reported that even 50 years later, Crimestoppers still receives a tip about every 4 days about this case. It is active and people care. While no one and nothing can bring back the age of innocence that was stolen from Adelaide, the Beaumont family and their loved ones, we can continue to honor the memories of Jane, Arna, and Grant, and those who loved them. As a reminder, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arna, and 4-year-old Grant were last seen on the afternoon of January 26, 1966, Australia Day. If you have any information regarding the Beaumont children, please call Crimestoppers at 1-800-330-000. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Voices for Justice is hosted and produced by me, Sarah Turney, and is a Voices for Justice media original. This episode contains writing and research assistance by Aaron Reed. If you love what we do here, please don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show in your podcast player. It's an easy and free way to help us and help more people find these cases in need of justice. Welcome to the Secret After Show. The studio door is open and our emotional support puppies are in the room. I don't have a lot to say about what's going on with me. I will say that I have been pretty enthralled. I don't know if enthralled's the right word. I have been very interested in this TikTok ban. And I know not everyone is a fan of TikTok. When I joined back in 2020, I can't tell you how many people said that I was extremely silly, in not so nice terms, for using the app to try to advocate for missing people, to try to gain awareness for Alyssa's case. A lot of people basically gave me a lot of crap for that. And of course, since then, I have seen the magic of TikTok. And really not just for me or for Alyssa's case, but for so many families. So many families go to TikTok and really begrudgingly. I don't think anybody loves, maybe, I'm sure that there are people who do, but for me, I know that every time I made a TikTok video, to this day, I am slightly mortified. I look back on my first TikToks about Alyssa and they feel so cringe. It is so, honestly embarrassing, but you do it for your loved one. And then you kind of just get into it and you kind of understand the weird, nerdy ecosystem that is TikTok. But my main point is, with this TikTok ban, I know that so many families are going to be impacted. These families who, like me, didn't see traction on these other platforms. I tried Facebook, I tried Twitter, I tried Instagram, and I saw some traction over there. But there is nothing quite like your loved one, your missing, murdered loved one, whatever it might be, getting, 1 million views. I think my most viewed video is like 20 million views. That is insane. That is more than usually like a typical 2020 episode, more than a Dateline episode, more than anything that airs on like an Oxygen. That is so many people learning this story, usually in a pretty short amount of time, that it is life-changing. And I'm telling you, you cannot tell me there's another app out there that is quite as equal as a playing field as TikTok is. It's just not. It's just not true. You cannot get the same traction that you see on TikTok on other platforms. And yeah, not everybody goes viral on TikTok, but if you're on there and you make enough videos, you'll see that at least one of your videos, usually if you make enough, will get quite a few views, more than you would get on other social media platforms. So it's just, it's honestly devastating. I think TikTok is such a wonderful source for advocacy. It's such a great way to unite people, to connect people, to share these cases, that losing it, potentially, we don't know what's going to happen at this point. It's just really, really tragic. And if you are a family member that is scared about losing TikTok, my heart is with you. I also implore you that it's not over. If you want to keep TikTok because it's great for families, if you want to keep TikTok because you like watching Charli D'Amelio or whatever, if you want to keep TikTok, reach out to your congressperson and let them know. Again, I can make a whole episode about TikTok. Just the thought of all these families losing their platforms, of thousands of small businesses going out of business overnight. I think if we lose TikTok, it's going to be pretty rough. So if you do care, I have another call to action for you. If you do care, reach out to your congressperson and say, hey, I care. If you don't, that's fine. I'm ready to move on to the case. I think that this case, I wish I could say it's unique, but it's not. But I think one of the staggering parts about this case, right, is that 3 kids all went missing in broad daylight. Instantly. Not one of your kids, not 2 of your kids, all of your kids are gone. I think it's hard for me to wrap my head around, even working in true crime. How does that happen? There are so many witnesses. What is going on? How is this man not found? I just think that it's a good case to cover because, and I'm not like here to fearmonger, but I just think covering a wide variety of cases just kind of paints a more realistic picture of how crime has happened, how crime is happening, and really, unfortunately, that there are threats everywhere. And no, I don't think that you should, not let your kids go anywhere, that you should, hover over them every single second. I just think as I cover more cases, I like to cover a variety of them that show a variety of different circumstances. And this case is pretty unique compared to a lot of the cases that I cover. I know that last week I just covered, Brittany Locklear was taken from her bus stop, but it was still dark outside. There were witnesses. I guess it never ceases to amaze me how bold people can be. And I think that this case is the perfect example of that. I don't know. I think it makes you think. This case really, really makes me think. 1, about how this can happen, and 2, about how cases that get so much media coverage so early on and for such a prolonged period of time are still not solved. I don't know. It gives me a lot to think about. I also think the next thing on my list was that, crimes do change these communities. And whenever I talk in an episode and I'm like, they didn't used to lock their doors and now the community doesn't feel safe, it feels like one of those true crime cliches. but it's so real. You see it all the time. And it's just another one of those things that I think is important to talk about, how crimes affect community. As far as media discrepancies, there's a lot in this case. It's been a long time, almost 60 years, over a lot of reporting. So there were a lot of discrepancies with timeline, with suspects, with statements. Who went to the police? Was it Hayden Phillips? Was it his wife at the time? Stuff like that. But I think for the most part, I got the main details down, or I should say, largely our reporter-researcher, Aaron Reed, got them down. So thank you, Aaron. As far as the hero of the episode, I put Nancy and Jim taking action, keeping an open mind, and holding out hope. I think that they did a really fantastic job, really just getting this case to the police as soon as it made sense. And I know that people will probably say, you should have reported them missing right then and there. And hindsight is 20/20. I think given the circumstances, they did what most reasonable people would do. You don't jump to immediately say, all 3 of my kids have been kidnapped in broad daylight from this very public area. In this community that has really never seen anything like this before. You think, something must have happened. There must be some type of miscommunication. Maybe they went somewhere. Maybe there was an accident. I think Jim and Nancy just did a really fantastic job under really like the most horrific experience. And that news report where Jim can barely speak, and then he talks about Nancy being sedated before he completely breaks down and like can no longer speak. It's just horrible. It's just absolutely horrible. And while I understand what it's like to suddenly have a missing person in your life, I cannot understand the effect of losing all of your children immediately like that. Nancy and Jim are the heroes of this episode because I think that they were incredibly strong. They held out hope, and I just wish that they could have seen it resolved in their lifetimes. But talking about a solve, let's move on to our segment of hope. This is from January 13th, 2025, and was written by Amanda Shaw for WIS 10 News in South Carolina. A man named Carl Lee Robert Price, age 37, has finally been sentenced after a missing teenager and hundreds of child sex abuse material images were found in his camper. So in 2023, Price was convicted of sexual exploitation of a minor, and in July 2024, he was arrested after he failed to register his new car and job as was required of him. I'm not going to lie, I low-key love it I high-key love it when criminals get caught by these small technicalities, like by just messing around on probation, not registering a new car, whatever it may be. I think it's like karma and justice all at the same time. But they found him in his camper along with a 17-year-old child who'd been missing from Missouri. And that child was found only wearing underwear. Of course, his camper was searched and his devices were taken. And it looks like across 3 cell phones, they found Instagram messages between Price and this child, including a message that said, quote, "You look a little young, but I like that," end quote. They also found 265 images and 141 videos of child sex abuse material. Now, Price pleaded guilty to possession of child sex abuse material and was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which I'm not going to lie, doesn't feel like enough. But when he is released, he will be required to comply with court-ordered supervision for the rest of his life. So it does make our segment of hope because this teenager was found, was rescued, and this horrible, disgusting man who they found these hundreds of images and videos or whatever is off the streets. One more disgusting predator off the streets. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.